The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, confirmed the words of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk that Ukraine is ready to fight for another 2 to 3 years. And he explained why exactly this period was mentioned. This means Ukraine and Europe have enough resources to continue the war for 2-3 more years, though Ukraine aims to end it sooner. Although there were also some rather interesting statements from Volodymyr Zelensky, which we will discuss with you in this episode today. But I also suggest that in this episode we analyze what Donald Tusk said about Russia's war against Ukraine and what other insights he shared regarding Europe's readiness for a major war. Everyone focused on the 2-3 years remark, but Tusk also made other important statements about the war. Zelensky today said that strikes by Ukrainian defense forces on oil refining facilities deep inside Russia have significantly affected the aggressor's economy. Because of these attacks, Russia has lost more than 20% of its oil refining capacity and up to 27% of its fuel production. Nevertheless, the Financial Times notes that Putin has been accelerating the offensive in the Donetsk region in recent days. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give it a like, and write a detailed comment under this episode. Subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News using the link in this video's description. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation, sponsorship, or paid subscription. You can do all of this using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the channel Alexei Pechi. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I'll be grateful for your support. So, Ukraine is ready to fight with Russia for another 2 or 3 years. But the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, hopes that the war won't drag on for decades, although he fears exactly that scenario. This is the statement that the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, made yesterday in an interview with the British publication The Sunday Times. This statement quickly sparked debate, with people claiming the war will last another 2 to 3 years. But let's talk about everything calmly and in order. Donald Tusk noted that he has no doubt that, despite Russia's wishes, Ukraine will survive as an independent state. The question is how many more victims there will be in the process. And here is a quote from Donald Tusk. President Zelensky told me that he hopes the war will not last 10 years, but Ukraine is ready to fight for another 2 to 3 years. The Prime Minister of Poland added that Ukraine is extremely concerned about what consequences this will have for the population and the economy. The president will not last 2-3 years, that's why Zelensky mentioned 2-3 years, but no more. Well, that's how Donald Tusk explains it to us, and this clarification kind of caused even more anxiety. Ukraine and Europe's safety margin is reportedly just 2-3 years. Let's note the statement for now and move on to the analysis. Donald Tusk also emphasized that Ukraine has the right to attack Russian targets anywhere in Europe. Well, here the hints are probably about the Nord Streams in Europe, which belong to Russia, and so on. Tusk believes the war in Ukraine is severely damaging Russia's economy. The Russian economy, in the long run, generally has no chance of surviving. Now it's having problems, especially after new United States sanctions. And after all these statements by Tusk, June 7th, 2024, Zelensky confirmed that yes, he really did talk to Tusk about 2 to 3 more years of war. Zelensky referenced Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's statement on Ukraine's willingness to fight Russia for another 2 to 3 years. In fact, it concerns frozen Russian assets and financial support from European partners. Zelensky explained that such a phrase refers to financial stability and the use of frozen Russian assets. Next is a quote. "I told our European partners, we will not fight for decades. But you must show that for some time you will be able to provide stable financial support to Ukraine. And that's why they have this program in mind for 2-3 years. Let's emphasize that for 2-3 years we will provide stable financial assistance to Ukraine. The war may end sooner, but money will still be needed for reconstruction. And it's important that the soldier knows he has a salary." Zelensky added that it is still unknown whether the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will return with new aggression after the war ends. That's why it's important to know what stable support for Ukraine from its partners will be. Zelensky noted that the frozen Russian assets will be spent either on weapons or on reconstruction, depending on how the war develops. Quote, "If the war ends in a month, we'll spend it on reconstruction. If it continues, on weapons. We simply have no other choice." But President Zelensky also added that for Putin, the scariest thing is that Europe has sent a signal. There will be no financial exhaustion of Ukraine. In other words, outlasting Europe and Ukraine won't work. Quote, "It's very important to send a clear signal. Look, we will finance them, and look, if you don't stop, we will continue to support them." This shows Russia the war is pointless, since neither we nor our partners will give up. Then Zelensky noted that the decision regarding the assets will be impossible to stop even if the future leaders of the G7 countries change their policies. Quote, "Whoever comes to power, they won't be able to stop the decision when Ukraine receives these funds in tranches and decides where they will go, on weapons or something else." This is our political victory, emphasized Zelensky. Next. He added that the idea of using frozen Russian assets is appealing and has great potential for practical implementation. That is why Zelensky called to convince all the skeptics of this idea in Europe. But, returning to Donald Tusk's interview, I noticed another very important and telling point. Next, I'll quote Tusk right away. "Russia really has big economic problems. Does this mean we are winning? Not at all. They have one big advantage over the West, and especially over Europe. They are ready to die." In wartime, this is an absolutely critical issue. You have no chance of winning if you're not ready to fight, or at the very least to sacrifice something. And this is really a problem for Europe, and Donald Tusk is the first one who spoke about it publicly, because Russia solved the mobilization issue by simply buying people like goods. They buy people, they buy convicts for big money. Plus, let me remind you, they mobilized 300,000 in 2022, but in Europe, well, there aren't that many people who are ready to die in a war. Whether you judge them or not, that's anyone's right, but the reality is, there aren't that many people willing to die. Tusk reminds us of Mark Rutte's statement, "We won't shoot down their planes because we're already stronger." It doesn't mean anything if, well, your population isn't ready to fight, and especially not ready to fight for years, like Ukraine does. That's what Tusk, well, the first of the European leaders, spoke about publicly. Meanwhile, Zelensky states that the strikes by Ukrainian defense forces on oil refining facilities deep inside Russia have significantly impacted the Kremlin's economy. Because of these attacks, Russia has lost more than 20% of its oil refining capacity and up to 27% of its fuel production. And Ukraine is determined to continue such attacks until Russia's oil sector collapses completely. And against this backdrop, the Financial Times writes that the Russian army has increased the intensity of attacks in the Donetsk region, stepping up operations in the east amid the unsuccessful peace initiatives of United States President Donald Trump. According to media reports, Vladimir Putin has tasked the Russian military command with establishing control over Pokrovsk by mid-November 2025. Some Russian units have already entered the city, however. The Ukrainian side denies reports of their forces being completely surrounded. Russian propagandists are already loudly claiming that many Ukrainian armed forces are surrounded there, and so on. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed that around 200 Russian soldiers have entered the city. At the same time, the Ukrainian Military Command reports that active fighting continues not only on the approaches to Pokrovsk, but also inside the city, where sabotage groups are operating. The logistical situation is complicated due to constant attacks and destroyed infrastructure. The months-long offensive is marked by Russia's slow advance toward Lyman and Konstantinovka. The Russians have focused their main attention on the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. These are major mining centers with a pre-war population of about 100,000 people. Russian forces are trying to break through to strategically important highways and expose Ukrainian supply lines to drone strikes. So for now, I'll leave it at that and won't go deeper into this topic. Let's wait for official information from the General Staff and see what they have to say about it. Friends, I encourage you to share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like the video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.